check out this beautiful chicken sandwich meat. This is a chicken deli loaf. It is delicious, it's easy to make, and you need to do it. So come along for the ride. Hey now, today I'm making my chicken deli loaf, which is a mildly flavored sandwich meat made from, you guessed it, chicken, which is seasoned and cured and then emulsified to get a nice smooth texture, cold smoked for a little bit of extra pizzazz, and then finished off by cooking. Now, when I'm making this recipe here, I do have a couple pieces of more specialized equipment that you might not have. However, there are definitely some ways to adapt the process to make it work for almost anybody's kitchen. So when those situations come up, I will mention the alternatives. So let's get at it. So our first ingredient that we're going with here is, of course, the chicken. Now I'm going with a 2-to-1 ratio here of chicken thigh to chicken breast. You could go either all thigh or all breast if you preferred. I just find that this is a really nice ratio for flavor and for a little bit of the fat content coming out of the thighs here. And with this recipe, you'll notice that I'm going to be using percentages when I mention any of the ingredients here other than the chicken, and that's so that you can adapt this and adjust it for any size of recipe, any quantity of meat. It's a very, very simple calculation. You'll simply take the base quantity of your meat, you multiply it by that percentage that I mentioned. So the percentage of the fat will be based on a percentage of the meat, but every other ingredient will be based on the total percentage of the meat and the fat, because that is our meat product that's going into it. So I'm going to have the full recipe along with calculations and an explanation of the calculations in the video description. As well, I will have links to a couple of things that you might find handy in order to make this. I should mention here that it is easier to work with chicken breasts than chicken thighs. I did have to go through the thighs and ensure that I removed any of the tendons and other connective tissues that would not play well with this. However, I have that all done. I do have these sort of chopped into smaller bits that will be a little bit easier to work with my meat grinder, and I'm going to get them into a meat tub, into the freezer, and just let them chill down, get slightly crusted up. Okay, so everything is nicely chilled down here. I had all the parts of my meat grinder in the freezer here as well, so it's really quite cold. I'm starting off with my coarse plate on here. I'm going to be running the meat and the fat through that. So I've got all of my pork here, and for the record, that is 3,000 grams. Yes, I'm running with metric in this because it's way easier for math, so everything's going to be based with grams on this. Now, that was 3,000 grams. I'm going with 15% of pork fat in this. We do need some pork fat in here. It's just the best fat to use, and it's going to help keep this nice and moist. Now, the 15% of that gives me a grand total of 3450 when it comes to the grams. So all of the other ingredients are based on that percentage, the total of the chicken and the pork fat. Now, let's get grinding. And grind number 1 is complete here. Now I should mention that if you're not interested in using pork in this, you could probably get away with using beef fat. I think that that would also work with this meat. I mean, it would change the flavor a little bit because it is a bit more strongly flavored. However, if you're trying to avoid the pork, that's what I would probably do. Now I'm going to switch out the plate here and throw on my fine grind one, and we're going to run it through again here. I'm doing that just in case I want to missing any connective tissues or anything like that. It'll just help bust them up a little bit more. Here we are. That second grind's always more of a hassle than the first one. However, we've made it through. We've got that done. Now, if you don't have a meat grinder like this, perhaps you have a stand mixer, maybe like a KitchenAid or something like that. You can get meat grinder attachments for those. They work well, especially for smaller quantities of meat. This is probably about the largest size of batch I would want to put through one of those, having used them before. You could also possibly get just a hand grinder and do that. Again, you don't want to do massive quantities of meat with that, but you can certainly get them very, very inexpensively. Another option, of course, is to simply pick up ground chicken from the butcher or your grocery store. I would try to get the freshest stuff possible. You could also potentially ask a butcher to grind some fat for you, and then that would be taken care of. So I'm just going to take this meat, I'm going to pop it into the freezer here temporarily while I just prepare everything else. Now my next step here is to mix in the spices and the salt and some of those initial things that we want in this meat here. Now for that, I'm going to be using my Hack and Meat mixer here. I really love this. I picked this up not too long ago and I use this for sausages and salamis and all that kind of a thing. Now, if you don't have one of these, don't fret. You can certainly mix this by hand. Honestly, I just picked this up because oftentimes I'm dealing with really cold meat and it's just so hard on my little delicate fingies. So I wanted to be able to just do this. It's a little bit nicer, and it also doesn't warm up the meat quite as quickly as your hands might, as the meat sucks all of the heat out of it. So anyway, let's get some meat in here. Now my meat mixer is cold. I didn't have it in the freezer, but it was out in the garage, which is fairly chilly right now. I'm just gonna get all the meat in. Now let's add some other ingredients. 2% kosher salt, 0.75% garlic powder, 0.5% smoked paprika, 1.75% of some nice maple syrup. We're just going to add this here for a little bit of sweetness. You could go with some different options on this. You could use honey, you could also use like a brown sugar, or even I guess a white sugar, whatever you like. Now this is an optional ingredient. I have sodium phosphate here. You can add this to it. It's perfectly safe. You can put it in. What this is going to do is just help the water bind with the meat a little bit better, and we'll be less likely to wind up with a drier finished product. So this just helps retain that moisture. And we're going with 0.4% of that into 8.4% of distilled water. We need this to be able to dissolve first here. So I'm just going to use my cute little whisk. We'll get this fully dissolved, and then that's going to be added to the meat here. And in we go. And now it is mix time. This is about the smallest quantity of meat that I can possibly use in this mixer here and have it still actually work, because I think about 7 pounds roughly is our minimum. And I'm just going to mix this here for a few minutes until everything is nicely combined. So now I have a couple of other optional ingredients. Now I'm going to be curing this because I want it to be a little bit more shelf stable. I don't have to freeze it if it's not going to be eaten up right away in the fridge. So I am going to be adding that. It's also going to make it a little bit safer during the cold smoke process. I'm not worried about that food safety thing. So I am adding sodium nitrite here. So this is the product that I have is called Cure number 1. It's just the quicker acting cure. I'm going to be adding 0.25% of that. And again, if you don't want to add cure to it, that's fine. You're just going to need to make sure to be a little bit more careful with storage. The other thing I'm adding here is sodium erythorbate, and that is going to help prevent the formation of possible nitrosamines and whatnot in the finished product here, making it a little bit safer to be using that cure. Also, it helps speed up the curing process. And I've only got, it's very little of that, it's 0.05%. And just finished mixing. Now they're mixed, I'm just going to get this meat out of here. I do like the tilt option that came with my mixer. Makes this quite a bit easier. Well, here we are with our meat paste, which looks oh so gnarly. I'm just going to cover this up with some plastic wrap and get it into the refrigerator nice and cold overnight. I might actually pop this in my keezer so it's at 1 degree Celsius. That'll just make everything a little bit easier tomorrow. But as long as you have a nice cold fridge, get it in there, and we're just going to let that cure and everything do its thing. All right, it's the next day. We are ready to get this completely emulsified. It's looking pretty good right now. I might even get away with being able to just stuff it like this. However, I want to ensure we have that super smooth texture. So in order to do that, we're going to use the food processor here. I'm going to do this in just kind of reasonable sized batches here because we don't want it to have to pulse for too terribly long. Just going to take some of this fun meat here and get it inside. I'm going to try to do this so that it's probably not more than 2/3 full overall. And now it's key here that we don't let this get too warm, so we don't want to actually run this for too long. So I'm going to do this in probably 10-second bursts, and I'm just going to keep an eye on the temperature here. We want to keep it below 50 Fahrenheit just to ensure that we don't sort of mess up the emulsification. This is still for sure going to be lower than that, so I'm good. So just to show you the difference here, there's definitely a difference in the emulsification. This is super delicious looking at this point. Now, this is going to be ready to be stuffed. I'm going to do this all in batches. But speaking of the stuffing process here, for this I am going to be using my Hack of Vertical Stuffer. I love this. I picked this up last year and I've used it for all sorts of projects. It just makes everything so much easier. That being said, if you don't have a stuffer, you can certainly still make do with the size of the casing we're going to use. You could probably even just do it by hand. I even think back to the day when I first started to make sausages with my father-in-law, and he was actually hand chopping all of his chorizo and then just using a little stuffer funnel like this and a wooden spoon to pack them. definitely more work than something like this. However, you can make it work. So as the batches are finishing up here, I am just going to be adding them to my stuffer. And now I'm just going to repeat with the rest of the batches. All right, so we have everything packed in there. That was 4 runs through the food processor at an average of 40 to 45 seconds total per batch. And I'm really happy with what the emulsification looks like. I'm going to be stuffing these into 105 millimeter casings. That should be enough to hold all of the meat that's in there and possibly have a little extra room. We'll just see here. So I did pre-soak this for 30 minutes, so it is ready to go. You can see that the diameter is quite a bit larger than this, so it is going to take a little bit of finagling and kind of just holding the end here at the opening so that we can get hopefully a good fill on this casing. Now, I could probably do this myself, however, I do have somebody here that's able to give me a hand, which is probably a good thing for this sort of weird fit that we've got going on here. The real trick is just trying to make sure I don't get smoked in the head with the handle. Sweet. Okay, so we did just hit the end there. I'm just going to slide this out, and actually, I think we will relive the old days and get something to just sort of jam the rest of that through. All right, so we got all of that meat into there, and now I do want to just sort of tighten this up a little bit here. I'm going to just kind of rough it up a little bit to try to get kind of some air out. We're also going to just give it some pokes here just with my sausage pricker, just so when you tighten it up, you are able to let air escape from the casing. And now finally, I am going to clip this shut here, just using my hog ring pliers and a 1/2 inch hog ring. Again, sort of a more specialized item. If you don't have one of these, you can certainly get away just with some string tying it around. I just happen to have these and I really like using them. They're very, very handy. And here we are, all done, ready for the smoke. In order to cold smoke this, I'm actually going to use my brick smoker. I love doing sort of larger smoke projects or cold smoking in here. I've already got this chicken loaf hanging in here up from the top, and I'm going to use this pellet tube smoker here. I've got it loaded up with Pit Boss maple wood pellets. I'm going to get it fired up here using my JJ grill torch. This works really well for this particular operation. Ooh, there we go. We got all those pellets lit up. Blow that out. Now this is just going to smolder like a cigar, give it some nice gentle cold smoke here. And we're just going to let this do its thing. Ooh, I'm telling you, this maple wood is smelling good. Just going to let that keep smoking away. Now at this point, I do want to cook this chicken deli loaf here, and there are a few different ways that you can do it. You could just hot smoke it, you could bake it in the oven. If this was a little bit smaller, I could fit it in my pot with my precision cooker and cook it using the sous vide process here. However, I'm going to be steaming it, and I'm going to be doing it in this rather sizable stainless pan here. This is something that I picked up at a restaurant supply store. It is almost 19 inches long, which is great because this chicken loaf is 18 inches long. I also happen to have this rack, and honestly, don't ask me where I got this. I've had this for years and years and years. I just found it in my cupboard one day, and I don't know, this is just a miracle rack. It just happens to fit this perfectly. So now for steaming this here, I'm going to get some water in here. I'm actually just going to throw some water out of my kettle into this, just so we can start off with some nice warm water. And now I'm going to get El Meat Log into here. I also do want to track the temperature on this. I'm just going to use my Inkbird meat probe here. I'm just going to insert it like that. I'm also then going to turn this on just a bit of an angle, just like this. Now, the nice thing about this pan here is it is right around the same size as one of these super large aluminum roasting pans. So you could actually probably get away with just using 2 of these and kind of crimping them together a little bit. I'm just going to set it up like this. I have my oven at 350 degrees. I'm going to pop this in right now. And with this unit, I'll just be able to track the temperature and use the app on my phone so I can get a warning when we're done. Now, in not quite 2 hours here, we've hit 154 degrees Fahrenheit. I would take this anywhere between 150 and 160. Much more than that, and you might, again, risk drying it out a little bit. but at this point, let's get it out. Whew. This does smell delightful. All right, and pull this up. And now I'm just going to pop out my Inkbird probe, and we're just going to take this beautiful little chicken deli loaf and get this into some ice water. I'm just going to have it here. I'm going to submerge it. And what this is going to do is allow it to bloom. It's going to hopefully prevent any sort of weird shriveling of the casing here. It's also going to end that cooking process and just allow this here to chill down, and then it'll be ready to slice. So I let this soak in that super cold water for just about an hour here, just because of the size of it. I really wanted to get that temperature down. Now I've got it all dried off here, and I'm going to get it hung up for at least a few hours. And after letting this finish blooming, we're just going to get this wrapped in plastic and into the fridge. Our chicken deli loaf is chilled down. It's ready to slice. Let's get into it. And here we are. A couple little air pockets in there, but other than that, look at that tight emulsified meat. Yes. Okay, we gotta try it. I'm being told that calling this sweet emulsified meat is not a turn on, but I don't know. I think it's pretty good. Let's see. Okay, of course I pulled back that casing a little bit here. We don't want that in the slices. I'm just going to get some slices off here with my Avantco 10-inch meat slicer. Here we are. These beautiful slices of deli meat. All right, let's have a little taste of this here. Cannot wait. Okay, first off, the texture is a delight. It is just so smooth. It's holding together amazingly well. It's sliced perfectly, which is exactly what I was going for. In the flavor, we've got some of that garlic and the paprika coming through. I mean, the chicken is such a light, delicate meat flavor to begin with. Everything else is shining. The saltiness, the salinity is just perfect. We've got some of that smoke coming through, and it's just gentle. We use that maple wood, so it wasn't too aggressive. And just going with that sort of 6.5 hour cold smoke was just enough to get what we wanted in there. So there you have it. It was a little bit of a labor of love there, kind of going over a couple of days of activity. However, completely worth it to make a chicken sandwich meat that we know exactly everything that's in it. You can customize it exactly how you want. The recipe is very easy to play around with when it comes to seasonings and things like that. I'll have to make some varieties of this and also upload them at a later date. You can do this with a variety of equipment levels. Obviously, I've got sort of some of the more fancy stuff that I've accumulated over the years, but you can do this here with sort of a standard level of kitchen equipment as far as complexity goes. When it comes to the cure and the sodium phosphate and the sodium erythorbate, also those are things that you can choose to add or not. However, by me adding them, I'm able to take this. In between slicings, I'm just going to vacuum seal it, pop it into the fridge where it's nice and cold, and this is going to last me months. Now, if you're choosing not to incorporate those ingredients, then I would say once this is done, you can slice it however you want, get it into the fridge, maximum a week. I would also, if you're not vacuum sealing it, try to get it in a Ziploc bag and remove as much of the oxygen in there as possible, just because that helps prevent mold growth. So ultimately, this is some delicious chicken luncheon meat. I can't wait to get this onto some sandwiches. This would also go great on charcuterie boards, all kinds of things. So give it a whirl, and if you do, let me know how it turns out for you. And until next time, keep your lunch meat, sandwich meat, all of those things at 11.